Welcome to Abraxas, white paper. The game of the future and the game of the past. An educational device on the Archon, which can be thought of as archetypes, archangels, these sorts of things. So yes, it does feel a little bit like it's meant to be. You have the 7 angels, 7 colors of the rainbow. And what is Abraxas? Well, let's start with the problem Abraxas hopes to solve. We've lost the context of our ancient magical imagination and it is rather unlikely to learn dead languages and systems due to an intimidation of the complexity. So I've created this game to help just naturally teach everyone the entire system that they themselves probably don't even know exists. So I needed a bunch of game pieces, and I tried to train machine learning models to do this novel approach, but I ended up just making them out of clay. I've made a couple so far. And then I transferred them to neural radiance field 3D models. Nerf. I've been nerfing them. And so far, that's Pegasus, Leo, and Draco. So I'm probably going to keep doing it this way since I'm pretty good at sculpting and doing what I want this way. And then, it kind of transfers right over to, and then you can color them or you can do whatever you want. And so we'll just give you a really quick preview glimpse of the game. That's just some pieces that I've finished so far in the last few weeks. There's cards as well, and the cards represent the pieces, and then we get into the Archon. Now these pieces are not actually used in the game. I just kind of threw these together to kind of represent the 7 suits, and we'll just go through them real quick from left to right. For spades you have Mars, for the caducea you have Mercury, for the Lindsea you have the Sun, for Venus, for the hearts you have Venus, for clubs you have Jupiter, for diamonds you have Saturn, and for Lunia you have Moon. I'm incorporating basically Joseph Campbell, Carl Jung, the 12 archetypes, the 12 zodiacs, disciples, chromatic scale. So the 12 is represented by Jack, Queen, King, Ace through 9. And it all started with taking a step back, looking at the esoteric systems as a whole. It looks an awful lot like a game. And so, looking further, it even has a name, and that's Abraxas. And this Abraxas is a transcription of that. Now, there's 7 ruling planets and the 12 archetypes, so that comes to 84, but that didn't fit very well into my little scheme at first, where I needed to have 88. And why 88 cards and 88 chess pieces? Well, there's 88 constellations, and each constellation holds a beautiful story inside, and our own heritage and myth as humans. And 88 is a magic number in China, and there are 88 keys on the piano, and this is also a very musical scheme. For example, the 7 can be represented with Do, Re, Mi, Fa, Sol, La, Ti. Do would be the 8th, and also there are 7 musical modes that I'm going to be representing here, corresponding to the 7 colors, so like Phrygian, Locrian, Dorian, all those. So to make 88, I added the 4 directional jokers. And so the 88 constellations have now been converted as the game characters and items in Abraxas. There's 22 major Akasha, 66 minor Akasha. And so there's 88 constellations, and that is a lot of chess pieces. So we're going to need a bigger board. And they're not all going to be used in each game, but they're going to be embedded into the board. It's kind of an interesting concept. That's just what it all led me to. So also the pieces themselves are going to be upgradable, and that's all based on a kind of like a poker hand point system that we'll get into when the time comes for that. And pieces can actually equip other pieces, so some of the pawns have riding abilities, so they can ride Draco or Pegasus and stuff like that, and they can become like kind of like super pieces. It can get a sword and be able to attack diagonals, or it could get a crown and have the ability to have a second move. And each piece can equip different items. Now, the game components digitally are going to look like this, and everything's going to be 3D printable. And what do the game pieces look like? Well, it's the constellations themselves. It's the 12 zodiac signs and all the other constellations. and they relate to each other in the stories and myths that they've left behind. And so I have organized the 88 constellations in their appropriate families and groups according to the myths and legends. And this is the game Abraxas. And to continue on with the cards, you see there's like a energy, and there's potentially we're gonna develop this kind of like a Pokemon scheme. The different constellations have different energies and different. They're kind of on different teams and different elements, strong in different elements. There's an elemental chart of the 5 kung fu elements. We're going to incorporate that, but there's also 7 suits. So yeah, it sounds like a lot, I know, but it's going to be fun, and the structure itself is going to provide for the weight of what's going on. All the chaos is going to have places to go, and yeah, there's going to be a lot of new things that we're not really used to, like upgrading pieces and. But there's quite a few other things that I haven't added to this white paper. But I wanted to go through the basic concepts of the game and how exciting it is. This is potentially what it might look like on a 2D screen. We're also going to make it into AR once we totally dial it in. It shouldn't be too hard. But that's kind of an example of what it might look like. You have your deck, you're dealt the cards, and that's your army. You can trade things in if you need to. Then you're kind of choosing your trump suit. It's like astrology meets astronomy meets magic meets chess meets poker meets history. And it's going to be coming 2023, and you can check out the GoFundMe or Kickstarter that me and my new team will be creating soon. Thank you for watching. What's the background? Well, this is Abraxas as it's portrayed. And it's a chicken-headed god with snakes as feet. Sometimes the snakes are ram heads. Here it's a snake and a lion. It's a representative of all of the archetypes together. And that includes the 7 ruling planets, as you can see on the shield. And I am incorporating it all into this game. So, as you can see, cosmic consciousness involves knowing the rotations of the planets and the constellations, and so by playing this game, you will naturally learn the placement of all of the constellations. You will learn how to read Egyptian hieroglyphs and several other dead languages, at least the basics of those languages. You will learn the mythology and the contexts of ancient planetary magic and what it means for you in the way that you live your life and understand society as it is. Now, Abraxas coins have been found throughout history, and it just seemed like such an anomaly to me as I was studying these things. I was looking for God, and I was looking everywhere, and I saw the Freemasons seem to run the world in a strange, secretive way, and they seem to love to be just dancing on a giant game board, and the artwork all portrayed a game board, ceremonial game board kind of looking thing, and I just felt like these guys are asking me to make this game or to channel this game. I don't know what it is, but if you look at ancient bellomancy, if you look at the history and where all these games come from, board games, stuff like that, the history comes through arrow divination, and the arrows themselves became game pieces, and that branched off into chess, and that also branched off into playing cards, tarot cards, and things like that. And so I figured if chess and playing cards are related, maybe they can have a baby, and I can use both of them as constructs in my game to kind of give my game a little bit of familiar vibes, so people can kind of already understand how to play and find novel uses for the already there infrastructure that everybody knows, like Jack, Queen, King, and then chess and chess moves. So I started to look at these games like really manifestations of the ancient archetypes themselves. And so I traced it all back. I read as much literature as I could about it. And the more I looked, the more I realized my destiny was to transcribe this ancient stuff I was reading into the modern context and make a modern game. And so that is how Abraxas came to be. I didn't start trying to make a game. I was studying archetypes in media design school and just understanding psychology and just the way that we work. And then I got into looking at Freemasonry and just who's running the show as far as society goes and making the moves. And I guess that's not something you can usually talk about, but I was really looking at that because I was born kind of Freemason in a weird way because I was born Mormon. And the Mormons, they kind of put you into a proposition where you need to investigate if this church is true, right? So that was my goal, I didn't want that as my goal, but that's what they gave to me. They basically made me do this investigation on Joseph Smith and is he just telling the truth or not? What is this book? What does it mean? So I think I've probably torn apart all of the material more than maybe anybody else that I've come across, illustrating the Book of Mormon, breaking down, making a lot of just showing that it's verifiably not true, and yet there's a million Mormons that smile and say it is. So this guy, I heard him talk about Joseph Smith practicing in the lineage of John Dee, practicing magic, and I had read Quinn's book on Joseph Smith's magic practices, and I knew that he had a bunch of magical artifacts he held dear to him. And his family also was found to have a ceremonial dagger with a bunch of magical encryptions that I ended up trying to decode, figure out what does this mean, where did it come from? And I looked into John Dee, looked into Agrippa. I wanted to know who's the movers and the shakers around here. So I found all this stuff about John Dee and Edward Kelly, and they were scryers. And they basically were a team summoning spirits. And then I realized, well, that's kind of what Joseph Smith and Oliver Cowdery were doing that whole time. And he was also a scryer. He was looking into a rock, just like John Dee was. And then I started looking into John Dee more, like, oh, he's another connection. And because these guys are actually summoning interdimensional spirits but also the Archon itself. Okay, so it is authentic, although it is a huge fraud, but that's how they built it. And don't ask me why. It's called lesser magic. It has a good outcome in the end, I guess, after everybody builds character. But I'm looking at John Dee's artifacts and what he was using, and the tablets John Dee was using. And John Dee was the first 007, and he coined the term the British Empire. And he comes through a lineage back to Henry Cornelius Agrippa, who is just completely a treasure trove of ancient kind of wisdom and just the way that they thought. Even though, from our standards, we would say they're crazy. Well, that was 500 years ago. They lived in a different universe. But he got me into the magic squares. I ended up looking for context, and I went through pretty much every lineage and tradition and book, going to school for it, taking classes. The Dhammapada, the Upanishads are really beautiful, kind of like yogic scripture or yogic text. I went around the world. I studied the Tao Te Ching a lot. I really love the Tao Te Ching. I recommend everyone read it 3 times. It's a short book. Read it 3 times at some point in your life. And then the Holy Vedas. It's beyond description. It's huge. It'll take a lifetime to study, but it's there. And then the Vigyan Bhairava Tantra is this really interesting 5,000-year-old text with a bunch of meditations on how to become love. this is another. I think this is another cover of that sort of thing. But yeah, all these have such gems in them. And what I want to do is take some of these gems and point people to these books' directions for the richness of the past. The Art of the Lotus Sutra is Na-myoho Renge Kyo and all this stuff in Japan. It's really beautiful stories. Character building stories. The Diamond Sutra, the story of the world's earliest dated printed book. I mean, we're just looking at all these techniques and stuff. They're all tools available to us. The tool of meditation with Goenka, or the Vipassana retreats. They're really beautiful. So this game is an avenue for me to kind of take the world that I have discovered and put it all into a game, put the languages into a game, and the teachings into a game to kind of help people kind of wake up to their oneness with all of this. And then I got into Carl Jung, the Red Book. That's a soul-shaking book, and that really woke me up into another dimension. I studied under Joseph Campbell, who's kind of like the archetype master. So I didn't study under him directly, but I just feel like I did because I studied him so much. Because he's interesting in his hero's journey, and just the study of mythology itself. There's no one more knowledgeable than Joseph Campbell. He's amazing. And so I'm going to include elements of all this stuff into this game. And I have not done that yet, but that's going to be fun. Stuff like Robert Anton Wilson's concepts with quantum psychology and just how we are creating reality with our minds. And we can actually observe that. And then also like little elements of Terence McKenna, who I believe had some really thought-provoking things to say, just kind of like the same kind of analogies to life. Also, just an author that I put in this presentation, then I might add authors I like Daniel Pinchbeck or Walt Disney. And Walt Disney was always like the production wizard or whatever. And I was reading about how he and Aldous Huxley were cruising around experimenting with mescaline, which Aldous Huxley wrote The Doors of Perception about mescaline. And so just little things that are in reality, and magic is real. And then you have the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the Bardos. You have little things, little lessons, and little things to awaken you to your own divinity all around us in the Greco-Egyptian magical papyri. Amazing stuff to be incorporating into the index of this game. I want to make this game scalable and be able to fit all this cool stuff. And people like Steven Skinner, who's written like 60 books. I actually have talked to him. He's really cool. And his work actually, his research in his life, and the books that he's written, I really consider what's the systems that he's like been decoding as being a really good candidate for a lot of the research that I want to put into this game. Not necessarily all about magic, but all about the world and all about culture, but also about magic. And that we're using this magic. I'm not casting any spells or anything like that. I've never really been like that. To me, magic is made out of your imagination, and I really love to make pretend. Ever since I was a little kid, So we have Monday, Tuesday, Mars Day, Wednesday, Mercury Day, like Miraculous in Spanish, Thursday, Jupiter, Friday, Venus, Viernes, Saturday is obvious, Saturday, and Sunday is obvious, Sunday.
Hi there, it's Balthazar, and today I want to share with you a form of candle magic that is based in the Key of Solomon. The Archangel Sachiel in this case, by the power and the authority of the holy name, which we've just attuned to, and by invoking the Archangel Sachiel, his power, influence,
and there's a lot of fear out there. People, all these different changes and things going on. There's a lot of fear. And, I'm invoking this Mars energy. It's Tuesday, sunrise. All right, greetings on this Sunday during the sun hour. I wanted to be in the light. It had to be in the sun because it's dealing with the third pinnacle of the sun.
So I guess what I'm introducing is like something like a new craft, but not witchcraft, but something called like lightcraft or something like that, where it's just revealing rather than covering and concealing. And just talking about the old, where this is all coming from, all these ancient traditions of bellomancy, which is so interesting. Because you have Sagittarius and you just have that whole time frame where arrows were really the mark of the kings, I guess. The kings were great archers for thousands of years. They're not kings, but the survivors. And here you have just some pictures of, I'm thinking of the ancient structure archetypes of the game, and then how are the old games structured. Like the tarot deck is the precursor to the modern poker deck. And then you have chess, of course, with 64 squares. It's an 8x8 grid with 16 pieces on each side, and each piece kind of represents different things, but it comes from Chaturanga from India. And then you have different pieces in Chaturanga, which are really interesting. So I was taking all this in, and I realized I needed to do a 12x12 or a 16x16. But yeah, the arrows were typically marked with occult symbols, which I plan on doing with these pieces as well, the things that relate to them. Many of them are modern gaming implements traced back to ancient divination with arrows. And then you start to think about if there was an ancient game that kind of taught everybody and just kind of held everybody, could that not be seen as Osiris? And was it broken apart? Was a game destroyed like a Jumanji crushed into the four directions? And the Freemasons want to resurrect Osiris. So maybe they are trying to resurrect Osiris by inspiring this game.
See the most merciful, the Grand Master.
So, to go from the beginning, you're dealt a number of cards. I'm going to get away from her. So, you get dealt your hand, and based on its family or suit, you can trade the pieces back. It's kind of like a game of pinochle. There's a rule base. It's still in the works, being dialed in, but it's the final step is establishing the rule base. So we're going to get it dialed. So if you want to check out the project, it's adventurechess.xyz, and if you'd like to support the project, the GoFundMe will be on the webpage, or the Kickstarter, whatever we choose to do. there's a possibility that we are going to be building this on its own blockchain or on a different blockchain, I don't know. But it's only going to be dealing with stable coins. There will be no volatile coins involved with Abraxas or its blockchain if it's on a blockchain. But there might be a limited number of games sold if that does end up happening. But yeah, this will all be worked out in the fundraiser. But this right now is just the white paper. And the team I would like to have the rev share to where the team gets a percentage of the revenue that the game ends up raising if we raise money. And a game will be phygital, so it's going to be physical and digital, with a 3D printed physical game that will come as well. And I'm thinking there might be a full canon of all of the classic sacred texts in one fat stack to be used for the game eventually. I want to make it expandable and scalable. So yeah, thanks for tuning in to Abraxas project, and see you next time. Welcome to part 2 of Abraxas gameplay walkthrough and fundamentals. We'll start with the board. It's a 12 by 12 rather than the traditional 8 by 8. It has 144 squares. The pieces are divided into 7 suits, each color representing one of the 7 suits. Starting off, we have Mars as spades, and its element is metal. Then we have Mercury, its suit is Caducea, the element is quicksilver. And the Sun suit is Lenzii, the element is fire. And scooching over here to Venus, the element is hearts, or the element is wood, and the suit is hearts. And Jupiter is clubs, and the element is thunder. And Moon is Lunii, and the element is water. And Saturn is diamonds, and the element is earth, or like basically stone, or dirt, or ash. And those are the 7 suits, and there's 12 pieces of each suit, so there's 7 suits of 12. Making 84, and not pictured here is the 4 directional jokers. And each piece corresponds to a card, so if you get the card, you get the piece. And then there's Draco with Leo and Pegasus kind of facing off over one of the golden apples the Draco guards and myths. The idea is to use the game as a platform to educate on all the cool stories and all the cool lore, so it's kind of like a home for lore. There's Jason's ship, the Argonaut ship. It's broken into a bunch of pieces in the sky that you gotta find. So there's multiple constellations that become the Argonaut ship, because you gotta find the sails, all the different constellations. So yeah, that's pretty much the fundamental structure of the game. You got it. So let's move on to a theoretical gameplay. Now, this might be a hand that you're dealt, and your king might be, Mars, and so your pawn is naturally stronger because it's trumped. So that's just something to keep in mind. There's a lot of aspects. Each time you click on something, it's going to show on that little star map where you're at, and then this is kind of like the brains of the game and how the elements interact with each other. And if you click on something, you might get the card for that piece to give you some information about its energy, about what it likes, what it doesn't like. And there'll be a little 2-bit or 8-bit animation, pixel animation of the character kind of doing something in the card. And he might move, and if you find somebody that he's related to, like if you're of the same suit, you have the power to recruit, and then he joins your team, he joins your army. But things can always go wrong. There's chance embedded into this game, so there's actually usually a dice throw and chances of certain outcomes that we're programming into this game. So there is a lot of work. And then if you scroll through the 88 constellations there, I'm basically showing how they relate to each other and just different qualities that they might have, such as like, are they lizard? Are they reptile? Are they mammal? Are they, what family are they? What are they related to? And then here's like kind of, basically you have an upgraded pawn that's kind of perked out, and he's about to go fight some ghosts and maybe recruit them.
There's there's many things that could happen. He could recruit them, he could fight them, he could win, he could die. Or he could equip them.
We went through all these chess pieces. There's 88 constellations, so I've been mocking up the possible looks of these things at the end, in the end game, where really the sky is the limit on just how much attention to detail we want to put into these things. But all of these are possible. So there's 88 constellations, so there's quite a few little characters, and they're going to look like the stereotype piece that they are. Like, so that giraffe, for example, would be a queen. It would be the size of a queen. It would basically look like a queen. You'd kind of know that was a queen. But then that toucan would be a pawn, because it's pretty much, it's going to be the size of a pawn. The dolphin might be a knight or a jack in this case. So yeah, we've been definitely mocking up a bunch of pieces to, there's a hologorium or whatever, the clock. And so there's lots of these pieces in the sky, and the idea is to gamify the constellations. That's the whole premise of the game.
Embedding mini star maps and magical systems into a game. So it's gamified planetary magic to help bring people up to speed on some old practices.
And so you might call this constellation chess, or you might...
or just, this is the Abraxas deck, and there will be other decks later. The Mazzaroth deck, the Candelabrum, and there's going to be an I Ching one. And so these pieces, they get perked out, and then they get the second esoteric move.
So you can equip pieces to each other as well. So here's a here's a quick look at what that might look like. Basically, what are we talking about? We're talking about a pawn riding a knight or a rook. And what that looks like is they basically join elements, so they get both elemental powers, and then they get the double move, so that the knight can jump into one of the L shapes while, the pawn, if the pawn has a sword, can slash on the second move. And the moves are divided into esoteric and exoteric. And we're still hashing out all of the interesting moves that we're going to kind of incorporate into this and solidify kind of a rule structure just for Abraxas. And we're trying to do it based on actual research into the ancient magical systems. And also just observations into harmonics itself, like such as music. So each suit is going to have, or be basically representing a different musical mode. And every constellation kind of relates to each other in different ways, whether it be by element or by legend. And here is the Abraxas logo. Basically, it's just the rooster itself, cacao. And so that's fun. You got the Abraxas rooster kind of dropping its game on us, and that's what's going on. And there's a sky map, and it looks like a sound wave going through it as the Milky Way, and that's the Abraxas. And there's the brains of the operation, the 7-sided star, and it's the 7 planets. But this is also being it's kind of like we're hybridizing this over to the Chinese element, which is a 5-sided star, but we're incorporating 2 more. So it's definitely a little hairy, and I might just scrap that whole idea. But it's working pretty good so far. And Abraxas coins kind of just something they found through history, and it looked like a game. And I was just thinking, what would they want the game to say, and what would they want the game to look like? So here it is. Is this game, because I was like, well, I'll use what we have to communicate this game, this ancient game. And there's the planets right there in the arch above, and each letter in the word Abraxas stands for one of the planets. And it's an ancient Gnostic god above gods. So this is that side piece that's going to be like playing in the constellation that you select will light up within that. And this is obviously really nice, and it's not mine, but it's basically what's going to happen.